Here we go.
Hey. Good morning, Nudelberg Daily Huddle. Oh, we got clapping going on from the audience. Kai Everett loves it this morning.
Enjoyed our time yesterday with the little one.
It was awesome.
So Thursday is Takeover Thursday, so I don't wear a jacket. I leave all of the thunder on the other side of the screen. Thank you for asking, Richard Tomer, man. Very nice.
That's really funny. That's really, really funny.
But I can promise you this. There is some thunder coming from the other side of the screen. The man did his homework and has some amazing stuff lined up for us.
Always, preparation is always key. Preparation is always key. So excited to share with you guys this morning.
As long as it's not preparation H.
Sometimes you need it. You know? Look, everybody's got their own problems.
This is true, baby.
Lloyd Gillick says Black Shirt Thursday.
Here we go, baby.
And me, I'm wearing, if you can see it, patience, which is always key.
And I'm saying, just do the work.
There you go. Kenneth, looking forward to LinkedIn like a pro tomorrow. Absolutely.
Bobby Goldfarb back in the huddle, man. You're in.
Let's go, Bob. All right. Okay, so I'm going to kill this music, even though it's fantastic. And for those of you that have not seen Bohemian Rhapsody, it's a must watch.
Oh, totally agree. Totally agree.
So for somebody who didn't grow up in that era of music, I didn't really have, I knew Queen songs pretty much because you knew Bohemian Rhapsody because of Wayne's World. Like that was my introduction to Queen.
Which is so ridiculous.
Right. So I didn't really have an appreciation for them as a band until I saw the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, and wow. So for those of you that haven't seen it, should definitely.
So what's interesting is if you watch the Elton John movie, Elton John got presented with that song and trashed it. So there's no way, he said it's nenever going to work.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
You just never know, man. You just never know.
So for Takeover Thursday, we are going to jump right in here. And I'm going to focus on what I call the 2 C's of success. When you spell success, it takes both C's in the middle. And going back to my coaching days, as I like to do, to draw the parallels between business and sports. As a coach and as a staff, and this is true in business, you have to evaluate your personnel constantly. And for us, especially when you came in as a new staff with a bunch of kids that you didn't recruit, that you had to play with, because in college football, you can't really cut guys. The guys that are on the roster are the ones that you own, and then you gradually recruit new guys in. We would define each person into 3 filters, right? The first one, which is the worst one, is being a reject, right? The next one, which would be okay, would be compliant. And then the next one would be committed. So you had 3 filters for them to go into: reject, compliant, and committed.
And just for the record, this is the actual grading system that you used, correct?
Correct. Yeah, you would label each kid as this is, and you took time to get there. The speech that you would have with a kid as you came in to coach him, whether it be the head coach, the coordinator, or the position coach, everybody had the same message that you have a blank resume. I don't care what you did prior. We're going to watch the tape that you've played. We're going to, get some information about you, but you have a blank resume. You build it as we're here. So as you went through, winter conditioning, as you went through spring football, as you went through fall camp, and then got into the season, they built their resume in their mind of who they were. And a reject wasn't necessarily that you couldn't play with him. It could be that, but reject really meant they wouldn't fit into that role that they were in. So whether they were in the wrong position, whether they were on the wrong side of the ball, whatever it was. Reject meant they didn't fit where they were, and we were going to have to find a way to either move them or get rid of them or limit them or, move them to a place where they couldn't bother anybody else. Compliant meant they were reliable, dependable, right? They would do what they were supposed to do, when they were supposed to do it, how it was supposed to be done, but that was going to be the limit to what they would do. They could do their role, and that was really it. And then you had committed, and committed really meant they were compliant. They did everything the way they were supposed to do it, when it was supposed to be done, how it was supposed to be done, all of that, but they brought energy and passion to it. They would think about ways to do things a little differently, or they would try to affect others around them, and they would do no matter what to get it done, right? No limits. So when you think about it in business, if you were to apply that to a business structure, reject is reject, right? They don't fit in the role they're in. They got to do something.
But I think it's really interesting and important to say that there are lots of sales leadership who has made that determination about somebody in their staff, which is no indictment on the person. Sometimes it's just not a fit, but they allow that person to live in their sales system. And so, a reject internally, a reject externally. As they're meeting people, they're pushing people away. And so, that Jack Welch thing, the bottom 20%, sometimes if you help that bottom 20%, in your case, you couldn't do it, but in business, if you could take that bottom 20% and help them find something else that's a good fit for them, you're doing a favor to both parties.
Well, that's exactly what we would do. Is just because they were a reject as a quarterback didn't mean they didn't fit as a tight end, or they didn't fit as a linebacker, or you move them first to try to figure out where can we get them to deliver some kind of value, to move them from a reject to compliant, because you're really never going to move a reject to committed, right? That's never really going to happen.
Right.
You can move them to get value out of them. So thinking about it in a business sense, if you're compliant in a business sense, you meet the requirements, you have complete focus on your task, and you do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, that would be compliant. And then committed would be that, but you'd also think critically about the task that you're doing, right? You'd bring ideas, you bring suggestions, and no matter what, you would be committed to getting it done however you can get it done. So I think as we look at ourselves as business leaders, that's great if you're going to build a culture. But when you take those filters and then apply it to your daily activity, it will allow you to figure out, what do I need to remove from my calendar? What do I need to schedule more of because I'm committed to those things? And then what do I need to keep in the middle as the things that I'm compliant with? Because I think, we're all responsible for doing things that we don't want to do, right? So maybe that's a thing that you would normally be a reject at, but you got to move yourself to being compliant with it because you don't have a choice. You have to do it.
Well, so I'll challenge you there. Good. I like this. So the fact of the matter is we all have a choice. And some people take a choice to not do it and just live with that. That's how you get sick. That's how, you get fatigued. That's how all of the things that manifest because you're going against the grain. You need to do something. Every time that someone does anything, they've made a conscious choice to do it. They know they're doing it. They're not oblivious. They're doing it against the voice in their head that's going, hey, you know what, knucklehead, you should probably not be doing this, So and that reminds me of like the Animal House movie, with the devil and the, don't do it,
I look at it, I think about that as when I was working at ESPN, like it was required of me to fill out my Salesforce log every day. I absolutely hated that activity. I thought, in my opinion, it was a waste of time. I didn't like doing it. I didn't think it tracked the right activities for me anyways. So the things I was putting in there felt like a waste of my time. So I had to move myself from wanting to reject that behavior to being compliant with it. Because if I didn't do it, I was going to get, chewed out the next day, and I was going to have more problems compounded on the fact that I had to do those things. So, but as you look at your calendar, which you should have everything scheduled because that's what we constantly talk about. But as you look at your calendar and you start identifying your behavior as, okay, I'm committed to this activity. I bring energy to this. I'm thinking critically about this. I'm finding new ways. I'm coming up with new suggestions. I am being 100% involved in that activity. There should be a lot of those activities on your calendar as opposed to the ones that you're compliant to. And I'm going to tie this all in here for a second. You know, as we talk about you're evaluating your calendar, and if your entire calendar is filled with compliant activities, right, you have one C, and you need two C's to spell success. So if your day is compliant,
drop the mic, man.
if your day is compliant behavior, you got one of the two C's. You have to find a way to get committed to the things that you're doing in order to find success.
You know, so when I think about it through an entrepreneurial lens, for me, becoming an entrepreneur, the thought was, oh, well, it's my business. I need to be good at everything and I need to love everything. Well, the truth of the matter is I do not have a passion for numbers. You know, in order to be good in business, you have to know the numbers. You have to have a feel for where the ship is going, what, you know, all of those things that are behind the scenes. So for me, it was about doing enough of the stuff that I loved so that I could get someone to handle that and delegate it. And you know, Sam is our guy. I wouldn't buy fucking shoelaces without talking to Sam because I early in my career, boom, got a guy that I said, listen, I don't do this stuff. Will you do this with me so that I can stay? And I liken it to, you know, actors are in front of the camera. They're the ones out on stage. They're not the ones doing all of the things that it takes to put that production on. But the more time they spend behind the camera, well, then they're off screen, you know, and we talk about this in social media because, you know, it is your movie.
Correct.
And in your movie, you need to be in front of the screen and be, wow, I'm not comfortable. I don't really want to be, I don't take pictures. And I was like, listen, I don't care what you did before. This is what you need to do now. So all of what you're talking about reminds me about you're not going to be good at everything. You're
Correct.
just not. So, you know, for me, again, this dates back to, you know, when I had my own sales staff, I would find the secret sauce with every person that I had. You know, they were my superhero. I was sitting down there and I go, you're Aquaman. You're really good underwater. You're, you know, theoretically, you know, and you're this and you're that. And I would exploit and train them to exploit what they were great at. Because and you even said it yesterday when you talked about T.O. T.O. was so great that it overcame the flaws. Allen Iverson didn't practice like he should, you know, but he was so great on the court. Mark Clayton, a dear friend of ours, right? Just didn't practice. I remember in the days I would go, you know, pick him up at training camp, and me and Mark Duper would go for lunch, and we would go to this little, you know, Jamaican place in the Miami Lakes. And I would look at him and go, guys, what are you doing? You know, we got to be back by 2:00 for practice. And they would go, we don't practice, man. I told coach, man, not my leg, man. I'm just not feeling it. You know, it was like, because Coach Shula knew that they showed up on game day better than anybody else. So that was their secret sauce. So I don't condone that. I still think you need to practice and do, but you get my point. So I think where you're going with this is that when you have a guy like in football, and I'm just sort of rambling here, but in football, a guy who has unbelievable speed, you can't teach speed. You got to find how to use that speed in a place. That's his. That's where he's
has a role, right? So when you define everybody, that's the great part about looking at it from, okay, you're evaluating people and finding specific holes. So for the people who are sales leaders or leaders that are evaluating people, it's great to look at it that way, to understand you have to find a way to move rejects from compliant, especially in business, because of how hard it is to hire and fire people. Like, it's not like you can just drop somebody like you can in the NFL. Sorry, we're cutting you. We're moving on to somebody else. There's a whole process that you got to go through with HR and onboarding and offboarding. The barrier to entry and exit is very hard. You're much better off.
Uber expensive. It's super expensive to the churn rate in sales is just devastating to teams.
You're much better off trying to move that person to compliant, which that means figuring out, number one, can they fit in the role they're in? And if they can't, okay, what can they do? What do they do well? Where do we find the role for them?
Dude, you're unbelievable, because you just opened up a real can of worms. And in a lot of cases with the leadership that we work with, we're talking to them saying, listen, what do you expect? You need
Right.
to share with people what the expectation is on a daily basis. And if they don't comply, you have a problem that you need to address. But if they don't know, they can't be scolded. Oh, I wanted you to do that. And then the salesperson says, I didn't know that. Well, clarity in all of the things you talk about in football is very clear. It's my way or the highway. I'm not, Nick Saban's looking at you. I'm not looking for your opinion. This is what I want you to do. I think in sales, there's a little ambiguity there. Oh, just go get me numbers.
I think it's not. I mean, look, how many times did we meet with people who owned a company or were high leaderships in a company that couldn't tell us what they really did in a single sentence? I see that all the time. I spend time with people. We do a virtual coffee for 15 or 30 minutes. I see people spend 10 minutes trying to explain to me what they do when you can't clearly define what your company does or what you represent or what you stand for. How can you then align your behaviors with what you're supposed to be doing? So taking these filters and applying it to your behavior and saying, okay, my day is filled with compliant behavior. I'm not really bought into anything that I'm doing. That's your own problem that you got to deal with, because you've got goals that you want to reach and you want to do. But when your activity is compliant all day, you're never going to hit your maximum capacity for what you need to do.
So here's the other takeaway. And this was an interesting paradigm that you went through, and Jake is listening and tuning in today. You earned the respect of the people that you were coaching because you did it. Right. You were there. You showed up. You put in the homework. You were prepared. You were not, a reject. You were not compliant. You were committed. And if you're committed, and that's a lot of the scenarios I run into where the leader is just doing their own thing. LT will talk about committed. LT's here. He knows, you play
Bill Belichick as a coordinator and position coach. Like
right.
That committed level, and Bill Parcells, you see that level of commitment from leadership. So it comes, it comes top down. You say it all the time. The fish stinks from the head down. Right. So if you have a culture problem, most times that's because the leadership has an issue. And Gary Merkin said this: sales leaders are not always thought leaders. Correct, Gary, but that doesn't mean that they can't be good leaders. They should still be taught and should still be held to the same behaviors that they're holding everybody else to. Because if there's a kink in the hose, you can't blame the soldiers for having bad generals. Like, that's not their fault.
But let's call it what it is. You watched me do it day in and day out. You saw me as committed. That created a culture where, okay, if that's what you got to do, so show me, in a lot of cases.
I got asked this on Adam Posner's podcast about, like, well, how did you, become like your dad, or how did you get the appreciation for what your dad taught you? I think people think that, like, we had these big sit down meetings where you were like, you got to work and this is what you got to do. It happens through osmosis. Like, that gets passed down because that's the environment you grow up in. As a developing child, you see things and hear things, and that's how your brain develops. So I didn't know that you instilled that into me until I got to college and got involved in coaching football. And I just immediately started working hard because that's what was in my DNA from what I saw. It wasn't that I got told that this is the way. Actually, the opposite. I don't think we ever really had that conversation.
No, because it's never really like that. That's part of what leadership is that, listen, I'm willing to do it, but in the special that Bill Belichick had with Nick Saban, which is an HBO special, if you haven't seen it, highly recommended. I took like 10 pages of notes from that, conversation. But with Nick Saban and Bill, there was never any ambiguity about what your role was and what expectation was. Here's what
Correct.
it is, right?
Correct.
So don't tell me, oh, I didn't know. So, back to that clarity, I know my goal, my day is clearly defined, and so I'm committed to my daily calendar. And it also allows me to I can be committed to the things I want to say no to, where I go, whoa, whoa, whoa,
It helped that we were also scared of Bill Parcells. But again, that's a dynamic that can exist in sports and football that cannot exist.
It's so true. Well, Saban, the same thing. When I was working with Coach Saban, I was scared shitless to walk in the Dolphin office. I mean,
Right.
Literally, I didn't know what would happen. And it was like, yes, sir, thank you. I just shit in my pants.
We've gone over our hard stop, which we normally say we're going to keep it to 20 minutes, but this has been a great conversation. But thank you to everybody for chiming in this morning. And I think the real, I hope you like the filters. I hope you apply it to your day, because you need the double C's. You need compliant and you need committed behaviors in order to be successful. And even going further to that, it's all about the seeing. Like, you can preach out of your mouth all day long if you're a leader or what you want people to do. But if you're not holding yourself accountable to those behaviors, it's really hard to get people to follow behind you.
Really, really well said. Really, the preparation for today's huddle, Mark, was outstanding. Your what's happening in your brain is so great, and the success that you're having now is no surprise because you're prepared for it. So great work. Great shout out to everybody. Today we have Gary Merkin on Tell Me Something Good. He was fantastic. He used to be the editor of, the publisher of Inc. magazine. Tremendous business insight. I love working with him. He's awesome. Last piece of business for today. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock Eastern time, the plane leaves again. We're doing another Learn LinkedIn Like a Pro. If you haven't taken it, you have no idea what you're missing. There's a ton of people doing it for the second time. The movie's even better the second and third time. So just great, just awesome. Super proud of you, kid. Go make it a great day.
Stay on the ball.